A 2022 health survey by the American Psychological Association revealed some startling stats about Gen Z. 1 in 4 said they have had more bad days than good, and 42% reported having a diagnosed mental health condition. Of those, 9 out of 10 struggle with anxiety, and 8 out of 10 also face depression. The facts are in, and Gen Z is the most depressed generation in modern medical history. And on today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll explain why. A number of medical studies have shown that Gen Z, those born between 1995 and 2012, suffer higher rates of mental health ailments than any other generation. Millions of dollars are being spent by governments and health agencies around the world to figure out what's prompting this global health crisis, which has serious and global repercussions for humanity. Like every generation, Gen Z worries about money, but finances alone aren't why so many are critically depressed. Still, it's a good place to start. The good news is, as of December 2024, the national GDP is at the highest it's ever been in history. In fact, you're living at a time where there is more global wealth than has ever existed in all of human history. The problem is you own less of that wealth than ever before. Today in America, the top 10% hold over 67%. Wealth is concentrating fast, and the middle class is struggling. In 1971, 61% of adults lived in the middle class. Today, that number is 51%. But pop on any 1980s family movie, and you'll soon realize that being in the middle class back then was significantly different from being in the middle class today. And that's because despite an increase in income, once you factor in inflation, the actual value of middle-class wealth has stagnated. Housing prices, for instance, once adjusted for inflation, have nearly tripled since 1975. All of these trends show no signs of slowing down, and the truth is we don't need fancy data to tell us that you won't be able to afford a home. We just follow the money. And where is the money going? It's flowing straight into companies like Blackstone, American Homes for Rent, and other major investment firms who have been gobbling up houses across the country only to turn around and rent them out. Why? Well, because of capitalism, but also because of a bunch of Wall Street investors realizing one day that nobody was buying homes anymore. With so many homes sitting on the market, they realized they could make money by buying properties and then renting them out to peasants too poor to actually own them. See, the market fixes everything. You can't own a home, so instead of making you homeless, the good capitalist, out of the goodness of his own heart, buys the home you can't afford and then rents it to you at a rate that you can afford. Never mind that by buying homes en masse, investors are creating artificial scarcity, driving up the prices across the entire market and thus making sure even more people can't afford homes and have to rent instead. It's almost a free money glitch. Thanks, capitalism. Now get back to your wage slave job, because as housing prices are driven up by investment firms buying homes to rent, they're also causing regular rent to skyrocket as well. One Reddit user summed up the housing problem facing Gen Z. I have a job that pays almost 6 figures, and I still can't afford to buy a house where I live. I could move to somewhere rural and remote, but then I'd have no way of working my job. When my parents were my age, they made half the money I make today and afforded 3 times the things I can. If you're Gen Z, that's a pretty bleak picture, but hey, at least you live in America, home to some of the best medical care in the world. Unfortunately for you, you live in America, the nation with the highest medical care expenses in the entire world. It's not even close either. In 2024, American citizens spent over $12,500 per person on healthcare. That is 36% more expensive than second place, which was Switzerland, at around $8,000. Are you diabetic? In Mexico, a vial of life-saving insulin will cost you around 16 freedom bucks. The moment you cross that border, though, that same vial of insulin skyrockets to 99 freedom bucks. Why is insulin so much cheaper in Mexico? Well, here's the official answer. Less stringent regulations and fewer lawsuits, since Mexicans don't sue over every little thing. But let's be real, none of those official answers explain why insulin in America costs nearly 5 times more than Mexico, especially when it's often made by the same company. The real answer is American politicians have protected pharmaceutical companies for decades in order to maximize profits at your expense, even if it means thousands of Americans end up dying because they can no longer afford their insulin. We're going to take a wild guess here. Living in a capitalist dystopia where homeownership and medical care are out of reach might have something to do with Gen Z's growing despair. But don't worry, it gets worse. So much worse. Gen Z is routinely shown to have the greatest awareness of the ongoing climate change crisis than any other generation. If Gen Z had been in charge 60 years ago, we might not even have the opening days of a climate crisis on our hands. But unfortunately, Boomers were in charge, and they are intent on squeezing every last ounce of profit they can while destroying the environment before clocking out. In a national survey, 65% of Gen Z reported feelings of anxiety over climate change. 65% also reported feeling powerless to do anything about it. And 65% expressed fear over the future. Those are the highest rates on record for any generation. Even younger Gen Zers were feeling the weight of climate change. One high school student put it simply, "I'm scared of what the world will look like because nobody is stopping climate change." But it's not just about feeling bad. Persistent anxiety and fear leads to serious mental and physical health complications. Gen Z is reporting development of stress-related ulcers at a higher rate than average, and anxiety and depression are feeding an explosion of mental illness. Too bad that it's only going to get worse, because as anyone born after 1995 knows, climate change is real and it's already here. Between 1970 and 2015, large forest fires in the U.S., those over 1,000 acres, increased by 300%. Not only are there more fires, but they're also burning far more land, with a six-fold increase in surface area burned, now averaging over 6.5 million acres a year. The U.S. Forest Service has increased the length of the fire season by 78 days since 1970. There's a variety of factors affecting the global increase in large fires, but chief amongst them by a long shot is the drying up of vegetation by increasing temperatures and a loss of rainfall. In the ocean, things are just as bad. Between 1979 and today, there's been an increase in major hurricanes with a decrease in smaller hurricanes. This is a direct result of average sea temperatures rising, with global sea surface temperatures increasing by 0.9 degrees Celsius in the last 120 years. That trend is increasing, with the ocean warming 3 degrees Celsius in the last 30 years alone. In February of 2024, the global sea surface temperature reached the highest level ever recorded, surpassing a record set just a year before. Meanwhile, boomers dismiss climate change as a hoax, probably because addressing it would hurt the industries they spent a lifetime building, and now they're leaving Gen Z to face all the consequences. They say ignorance is bliss, and in this case, it might be good for Gen Z's depression that education is becoming ever more expensive. Then again, maybe being locked out of degrees needed for the few high-paying jobs remaining isn't a good thing for Gen Z's mental health. But just how bad have things gotten? In 1950, someone attending the University of Pennsylvania would be charged about $600 in tuition a year. That comes to just over $7,800 a year today. Definitely pricey even by boomer standards. But if boomers had to pay today's tuition at UPenn, they might have lost their minds. A year of tuition and fees now costs a whopping $68,000. Putting that money in our time travel machine comes out to a yearly tuition in 1950 of just under $5,200. But how does that compare to average salaries? Well, in the 1950s, our boomers' parents were earning an average salary of $3,300. That means that good old UPenn at $600 a year was definitely out of reach for most middle-class families, but not all. What's the average salary today, though? Just over $65,000. That means that taking a single year at the University of Pennsylvania costs more than what the average family pulls in before taxes. But those are fancy learning schools for fancy pants who can read and spell good. What about the average schools for average wage slaves? In the 70s, public four-year schools experienced an annual growth rate of 7.5% on average. When schools everywhere realized that they were getting away with it, they tried it again in the 1980s, raising rates an average of 9.2% a year. But it was between the year 2000 and 2021 that colleges and universities decided to really push their luck. After all, nobody had called them out on their nonsense for 20 years. So why not go for broke? Since 2000, tuition has increased on average a whopping 65%, from around $8,600 to over $14,000. That rate has shown no indication of stopping, though there may finally be some political action moving against the ever-inflating prices of American education. Predictably, some members of Congress have blocked every attempt to reform tuition or forgive student loans, even though when they went to school, tuition was just a fraction of the average household income, not practically all of it. As one college student said on Reddit, "When my parents were my age, they were working and going to school, and their job paid for their entire tuition. I'm working a regular job and gigs like DoorDash when I can, and I still can't afford my own tuition. My parents had to help me out, but I'm committed to paying them back, I just don't know when." Let's face it, if Gen Z wanted an education, then they shouldn't have been so lazy and born so late. It's really on you, not them. Another leading cause of stress for Gen Z is the increasing likelihood of a major war and ever-present shadow casting anxiety over their futures. For a generation already grappling with economic uncertainty, climate change, and social unrest, the prospect of a global conflict feels like the ultimate tipping point. It's not just fear of war itself, but the harsh reality that if such a conflict were to erupt, it would be their generation shouldering the burden. The thought of being thrust into the front lines, literally or metaphorically, adds to a growing sense of generational frustration. This anxiety is further compounded by the perception that older generations, particularly the boomers, are the ones setting the stage for these potential conflicts. Decades of geopolitical tension, climate inaction, and a relentless focus on economic growth over sustainable peace have created a volatile world, and it's one where the price of these choices might be paid in blood by those who had no say in making them. Today, Gen Z is facing the growing threat of authoritarianism as nations across the globe try to overthrow liberal democratic world order that has reigned since the end of World War II and reshape the world in their image. This inevitably means that if war comes, it will be Gen Z that's on the front lines. With all the stress that Gen Z faces, it at least can sit back and relax with some good old video games and social media, except both of them are terrible too. Social media is feeding a global epidemic of insecurity and depression, and this is another thing we don't need fancy statistics to prove to you. Anyone with a smartphone has experienced these moments of envy and resentment as influencers flaunt their perfect lifestyles that you can't afford. The reality behind those glamorous posts, because not everyone is cut out for what it takes to fund that kind of life, well, trust us, it can get messy. But the explosion of social media has led to what many are calling a self-esteem crisis. Beautiful models with perfect bodies are creating a self-esteem crisis amongst younger women. Never mind that those perfect looks often just come down to genetics, pricey self-care routines, and nutrition plans most can't afford. And it's not just women either, because guys are constantly having terms like alpha male thrown in their face by guys who claim to have never touched steroids, but inevitably, oh whoops, yeah, of course they were juiced the entire time. What many don't know, however, is an insidious new trend that is absolutely destroying Gen Z's self-esteem, and the worst part of it is none of it is real. We're not talking social media isn't real, they're just showing the best parts kind of not real. We mean straight up artificial. An explosion in artificial intelligence has led to the rise of digital avatars so realistic looking that they are indistinguishable from real people. At first, you had to worry about digital deepfakes of celebrities like Jake Paul shilling you crypto scams, which had to compete with real Jake Paul shilling crypto scams. But in the last 2 years, there's been an explosion of fully digital avatars, and they are behind social media accounts with tens of thousands of followers each. These digital personalities look so perfect, they set a standard no one can actually live up to. Everything about them is fake, and they often are used to promote various products. But despite being market vehicles to reach impressionable young audiences, they're having a very real effect on the mental health of a perpetually online Gen Z. This is only the tip of the iceberg, because Gen Z is the first generation that is having to grow up questioning basically their entire reality. AI video generation has advanced to the point that it's often indistinguishable from reality. Well, in most cases. The technology hasn't quite figured out that humans don't have 6 fingers, but it's getting disturbingly close. And it's not just about empowering disinformation agents like political activists, governments, and even terrorists. If you're a Gen Z artist, then good luck having a career in the near future. Alright, well, at least you can escape your AI-generated reality by diving into video games, except even those suck too. Quick, what's the last video game you bought that was 100% complete at launch? No DLC to add on to the story, no microtransaction unlocks, no 1 year long, this game wasn't actually finished, but thanks for paying to beta test it for us. The video game industry, the one thing Gen Z had to fall back on, is in crisis. Massive layoffs have swept the industry as sales plummet, with publishers and developers scrambling to figure out what modern audiences want. It turns out players want a game that is complete on launch, and without microtransaction monetization. Good thing you're making those big DLC bucks at your wage slave job, and if it's not DLC or microtransactions, it's loot boxes, because it's not gambling when it's a video game and it's children doing it. The verdict is in. Gen Z is the most depressed generation since records started being kept. And even though boomers will likely tell you to suck it up, fact is you're facing a world they never had to. While boomers got to play on novice difficulty, they made sure to crank it up to Iron Man mode for you, and then they'll have the audacity to tell you that Gen Z is too soft, climate change isn't real, and you'll be able to afford a home if you stop splurging on things like avocado toast. What do you think is driving Gen Z to feel this way? Social media, the economy, or something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now go check out why companies are firing Gen Z workers, or click this other video instead.